Okay, our crank and our cams have gotten out of time since we removed this bolt, so we're going to temporarily reinstall the crankshaft bolt. Okay, to realign the crankshaft pulley, alright, so this little mark right here is going to be straight up, and it's going to point at this line here. So line up that mark with that line right there. It's going to put this keyway slightly off to the left. So line up this mark, that mark. It'll have the keyway right here, will be slightly to the left. When you look at the bottom pulley, or the bottom of the pulley, you'll see a little dot right there on the bottom. So you want to make sure that that little dot is on the bottom. You want to line the cams back up as close as you can. Turn it slowly, because it will spring back on you. Okay, that's pretty close right there. Doesn't have to be exact right now. Just get as close as you can. Okay, so we're lining up this mark with that mark. Doesn't have to be exact right now, but get it as close as you can. Get this mark lined up with this mark, and then the marks lined up there on the crankshaft pulley. Okay, we're ready to put on the new timing belt. You'll notice some marks on the timing belt. This Toyotas, we have a mark here for right cam. We've got a mark for left cam, and on the bottom of the belt we have a mark here for the crank. Okay, we can just lay the timing belt like this, just so you don't have a whole lot of slack down there at the bottom, because it'll make it more difficult when putting it on the crankshaft. You see the arrow here for the crank? What we want to do is line that up with the dot on the crank pulley. That dot right there needs to line up with this arrow on the timing belt. Okay, so we have that dot lined up with the line on the belt. So hold that snug as you can, and then go back up to the top. Okay, so while holding the belt firmly with one hand, wrap it around the water pump pulley, and around here to this cam. And you want this belt as tight as you possibly can get it right now. Right here you can see that it is slightly off. We want that arrow to line up with that white mark on the pulley. It's just a little bit off, but we can adjust that here in a minute. Bring the timing belt back over here. We're going to do the same thing on the other cam. Try and get it as close to that mark as you can. Okay guys, so once we're kind of at this point right here, you can see I have the belt just kind of loosely wrapped around. We've got it essentially lined up with the arrows here, the marks there, and same here, as well as the crank. It's also right on the timing mark. You can go ahead and remove this pulley right here, the tensioner pulley. It'll make this a little bit easier. Or if you don't want, you don't have to. It's really kind of up to you what you want to do. If you're struggling with getting the belt on, then go ahead and loosen that bolt right there, and you can pull this pulley off. I'm going to show you how to do it without pulling that off, because this can be, once you get used to this method, it might be a little bit easier for you. So just choose which method works for you. If you're struggling with this pulley on, then just take this pulley off line up all your marks like I've shown you, and then once all that's on, then we'll put this pulley back on. To make this as easy as possible, what you want is all the slack in the belt right here at the tensioner pulley. So this right here, that's a little bit too much slack. This right here is okay, but what we want to do is we want it to be as tight as we can get it right here, down here. Everywhere it needs to be tight except for right here at the tensioner pulley. And this is going to be the only way you're going to get it timed right and get it on easily. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to rotate these cam gears backwards, so counterclockwise. So you can use these little clips like I have here to kind of hold the belt in place if you want. You don't have to, whatever's easier for you, but just slowly rotate them. And what we're trying to do is get all this slack on the belt over here. So just do a little bit at a time. Just kind of mess with it and see what's easiest for you. So now we rotate a little bit. You can see I've got a little bit less slack there, a little bit less slack here. Still got some slack right there. So what we want to do is rotate this cam a little bit more to try and get all that slack out. So let's check the belt again. You can see we got pretty much all that slack out. We got all that slack's gone. That slack's gone. So all the slack is gone on this side of the belt, which means all the slack that we have left is right here where we want it. So we can double check our marks again, make sure that the belt hasn't slid off. We've got the timing mark right there, lined up with the arrow right here. Have that mark as well, lined up with the arrow. Okay, and here on the bottom of the crankshaft pulley, you can see that that arrow is still lined up with that dot on the crank pulley. Alright, so now that we're satisfied, all our marks are still lined up, you can proceed to pull the belt over the tensioner pulley. Now this can be a little bit difficult, which is why I said if you're having problems with it, then go ahead and take this pulley off. The procedure is exactly the same. The only difference is it's going to be a little bit easier to put the belt over this gear. But see how I have the belt only partially slid onto this cam gear? So that's going to allow me to push the belt over this tensioner pulley. Okay, let's double check our marks again. Arrow lined up with the mark. Arrow lined up with the mark. Lined up with the mark there. Okay, now that the belt's on, go ahead and slide the coupling on. Tighten the bolts and the nut. Alright, next step, we're going to take the new tensioner that's already compressed with the grenade pin, or your old tensioner if you're reusing it, already compressed with a grenade pin or some sort of device to lock the rod here back in the tensioner. We've got one bolt already in right here. Slide it through the hole. You see the grenade pin is still sticking out here in this opening right here on the fan bracket. Try and run these bolts as far in by hand as you can. You really don't want to cross thread these, and you want to tighten them down evenly back and forth between the two bolts. Be careful not to over tighten the bolts. This is aluminum, so it would very easily strip the holes out. Okay, once you have the tensioner bolted in, you can double check all the timing marks again if you'd like. If you already know they're good, then you can proceed to pulling the grenade pin. This will release the tensioner, it'll push this up, and it'll take the rest of the slack out of the belt. Okay, now I'll go ahead and take this crankshaft bolt back out. Okay, next we're going to want to put this ring back on. Now you can put this on the wrong way, so you need to be very careful when you put this ring back on the crankshaft. Alright, so if you look at it closely, you'll notice that this one edge is actually beveled. Alright, so it's probably hard to see on camera. You can more or less feel it that one edge is kind of beveled. So it's kind of like concave, convex, whatever. So if my hand were this circle, you would want it in this direction, going on this crankshaft right here. So if you were to turn it around, so say like that, it would tear up the belt. So you want to make sure that the curve goes in this direction. Next we'll put on the lower timing cover. Now go ahead and slide on your crankshaft pulley. Make sure that the key on the crankshaft lines up with the key way on the crankshaft pulley. And at the same time, you can look at your original timing mark on the crankshaft pulley and line it up with the 0 on that bottom timing cover. Crankshaft bolt back in. Okay, now it's a good idea to go ahead and turn the engine over by hand. Turn the crankshaft over 2 times and double check that all your marks still line up. Okay, you can see our marks lining up there on the crankshaft. Got our marks lined up on the right hand cam and our marks lining up on the left hand cam. Now you'll notice that the lines on the belt are now off. That's normal. They're only going to be lining up when you first put the belt on. Once you spin the engine over, the lines aren't going to line up, but your marks should still line up. So you got that notch right there. It's lining up with the notch right here on the back of the timing cover. That's lined up. So everything's lined up now. We're confident that the timing belt's on right. Double check the tension on the belt. That's good and tight. That's good and tight. Good and tight. Good and tight. Put this pulley back on. Okay, now we need to go ahead and clean up the gasket surface for the water outlet. Just going to suck some of the fluid out. We want to go ahead and clean up this piece as well. Okay, let's go ahead and put back on the upper timing cover. Get your bolts tightened up. Okay, let's go ahead and get this bracket put back on here. Okay, on this bracket, this is what we're going to use to adjust or to tighten the power steering pump belt. So you're going to want to go ahead and tighten the 3 bolts here on the front. 1, 2, 3, and leave that back one, that one that was hard to get to, leave that one loose, and because we'll need that when adjusting the power steering pump belt. Alright, let's put the fan back on. Slide this pulley into place. If you have a shroud, go ahead and put the shroud and the fan in together at the same time. Okay, once you've got all the nuts started, go ahead and start tightening them. And you want to do this fairly evenly between all 4 nuts. You don't want to completely tighten one down and then move on to the next. You want to kind of get them all a little bit snug before you fully tighten the nuts. Okay, once you have all the nuts snug, you're going to want to take a screwdriver and wedge it in between 2 of the nuts, and then take the wrench and tighten it down. So the screwdriver will hold the pulley still while you tighten the nuts. Okay, let's go ahead and put the alternator belt on. Just slide it around the fan. Okay, and the way to tighten up the alternator belt is you'll just take a pry bar or something like that and wedge it so that the alternator is pushed back like that. Once you get it to where you want it and the belt's tight, go ahead and tighten those 2 bolts that you loosened up earlier. Okay, next we're going to put on the AC belt. This one will just go on the bottom pulley, the crankshaft. It'll go on the AC compressor, which is on the bottom, and then it will go on the that tension arch, which is on the bottom. So it'll be in the middle groove of the crankshaft pulley. There's that bolt that we had to loosen earlier. You may have to loosen it a little bit more in order to slide the pulley up enough to get the belt on. Once you got that around, we'll go ahead and tighten this bolt up here until the belt is tight, and then tighten up that pulley, or tighten up this bolt on the outside of the pulley. Okay, now we're going to put on the power steering belt. What you want to do, since we didn't do it earlier, is go ahead and loosen this bolt right here on the power steering pump. And since we already left that one hard bolt in the back over here loose, we just loosen this bolt up, and that'll allow the power steering pump to rotate like this, or to pivot. So we loosen this bolt, boom, this pivots now. We'll put the belt on. Now we can go ahead and put the studs back in for your water outlet. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put RTV around the water outlet here. Alright, last step is to go ahead and top off the coolant. If you change the water pump, or even if you didn't, it's a good idea to go ahead and bleed the cooling system. You can probably find a video on that. Just to keep this one as short as possible, I'm not going to show you how to bleed the cooling system, but go ahead and top off the coolant, get the system bled, Make sure there's no air in there, make sure the heater works, and that there's no leaks. Let it run probably about 10 or 15 minutes until it completely warms up and you make sure all the air is out, and that's about it. Good job.